So what's the secret to passing the STAAR ECR and other standardized test essays? The answer's at the end of this video, so make sure you watch through to the end. First, I want to let you know that some of these materials are going to be available on my website here. It will ask you for your email, but then you've got a link there for free English study materials and a place to book a free consultation with me if you like what you see today and you want to hire me as your English coach. So the essay portion of the STAAR test is now called the Extended Constructed Response. This changed a few years ago. The max score you can earn is 5 points. Up to 3 points comes from your thesis, organization, evidence, and clarity, and up to 2 points can come from your punctuation or grammar. So if you're one of these students who gets really anxious about the written portion and just never passes, or maybe your child feels this way, know that you do not need to score a 5 in order to pass this test. You want to shoot for a 5, but if you do okay on the other portions of the test and you get maybe a 2 or a 3, you can still do okay and pass the STAAR test. This is across the board with most of these standardized tests. You want to shoot for the highest score, but you do not need to get the highest score in order to pass the test. So just keep that in mind, keep your confidence high, and go in with the intention of passing the test. All right, so this is an English 2 response, and this is a score 5, the perfect score. But if you're an English 1, this is still going to be highly useful for you as well. The reason that the situation in Antarctica is particularly unusual is because the area is governed by many nations, unlike other territories on Earth, and people are putting in a lot of effort to preserve the local ecosystems in the region. There is no other place on Earth that gets this odd and special treatment. First, the biggest thing that sets Antarctica apart from the rest of the world is the way it is governed. By the 1940s, already 7 countries had claimed territories in Antarctica, but unlike the lands claimed in other parts of the world, there weren't clear boundaries. Scientists from 67 different countries formed the International Geophysical Year to research the area and also show how everyone could share the continent. The Antarctic Treaty was created to make Antarctica a safe place for scientists to study ecosystems, weather patterns, and the effects of pollution, but also holding them accountable for preventing harm to local creatures and resources and using the area for only peaceful endeavors. Unlike all other countries on Earth, Antarctica is governed by many countries rather than only one. The regulations put in place are made by people from all over the world, which allows Antarctica to be the only place where nations work together to support the research of scientists and prevent damage to the environment. Also, the attention that the preservation of the natural ecosystems in Antarctica receives is unprecedented. Scientists are constantly studying the effects that tourists have on the wildlife and environment. Even ships dumping garbage into the oceans is far less acceptable in Antarctica than it is in the rest of the world because it is an area in particular that we want to protect. More measures are put in place in Antarctica in the context of avoiding invasive species. When Europeans came to the Americas, they purposely brought their local animals with them. They did not even worry about how it could affect the native wildlife. But in contrast, even though so many countries are involved in Antarctica, none of them have brought their local animals because they want to preserve the region. We do not build buildings everywhere in Antarctica, unlike the rest of the world, as to not disturb the ecosystems. It is so odd that Antarctica has always had this special treatment, while everywhere else on Earth throughout history did not get the same care. People are actively working together to preserve the continent. The situation in Antarctica is odd due to the way that the region is governed and because of the large effort from nations all over the world to protect the environment and native wildlife that live there. We need to continue to protect Antarctica, but we also must protect the rest of the world as well. So let's see how this student did. For organization and development of ideas, they got the max score, 3. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but let's point out a few details. They have a clear thesis. This is going to be essential. The organization is effective with a purposeful introduction and conclusion. They use paragraph to paragraph transitions, so you want to use those transition words. They cite evidence from the text and they clearly explain it. The expression of ideas is clear and effective with specific word choice. They give a few examples here. And then the response reflects a thorough understanding of the writing purpose. So this is by no means a perfect essay. Some of you may have thought, well, that's a really long essay. They used a lot of big words, and that's true, but some of them didn't really fit. The student did, however, have a few key elements that really helped them out, such as a clear thesis, transition words, and using evidence from the text, and then backing up that evidence with an explanation. So let's see how they did with the conventions. So for conventions, they of course got the max score as well, a 2. And I'm going to go ahead and read through all of this because the writer did actually have quite a few mistakes and they still got the highest score you can get. The writing demonstrates a consistent command of grade level appropriate conventions. Although there are some comma errors in sentence construction, the response contains mostly correct punctuation, capitalization, and grammar. Some minor spelling errors are present. Boundaries, resources, environment, acceptable, there. The response has a few errors, but these errors do not impact the clarity of the writing. So even though this student doesn't have a perfect essay, they've got spelling errors, capitalization errors, comma errors, they got the max score, and you can too. Just make sure that your writing is clear. If your errors mess with the clarity of your message, then you're going to get more points taken off. However, if the reader can understand what you are trying to say, and let's be honest, most of these are going to be graded by AI these days. If the AI grading platform understands your message, you're going to be okay. You're not going to get a 0 if your message is clear and most of your spelling and most of your punctuation is correct. When you go in to write your essay, I want you to use TEDL to write your body paragraphs. We'll talk about the intro and conclusion in a moment. My students that use this pass. If they don't pass, they at least increase their score. TEDL, topic sentence, example sentence, detail sentence, link to the topic sentence. All right, if you've seen one of my lessons before, you know how this goes, so I'm just going to do a quick rundown here. But your topic sentence tells the reader what you're writing about. Your example sentence or section is where you might put a quote from the article, or maybe you give just more information to make your topic clear. Your detail sentence or section is where you're going to explain that evidence. You're going to explain that example. You're going to go into more detail. Now, I really want to point out that your example sentence and detail sentence or section may be more than one sentence long. This link to the topic sentence, some students call it the last sentence. Don't overthink it. This is where you clear up all your ideas and you close that paragraph. If you're planning your essay on paper, which I honestly really recommend, it's easier that way and it only takes a few minutes to type up. You're going to split your piece of paper into 4 sections. And you can do this really quickly by folding it or just drawing a line across the paper there. You'll notice I've separated it here. I've got hook, bridge, thesis in the first square, and I've got this labeled introduction. Then your body paragraph has TEDL, TEDL, restate thesis, and final thought or call to action. So like I said, I do recommend that you plan your essay out on paper, but let's be honest, most students are not doing that these days. So if you're going to be planning your essay in the form or where they allow you to type on the test, it's going to look a little more like this. And this is what I'm going to use to break down that score 5 essay that we just read. So let's take a look. So like I said, I do recommend that you plan your essay out on paper, but let's be honest, most students aren't doing that these days. So if you plan your essay out in the area where they allow you to type on the test, it's going to look a little bit more like this. And this is what I'm going to use to break down that score 5 essay that we just read. So let's see how that essay fits with this model. So this is from the release test from 2024's STAAR. And if you're really taking the test, you'll notice that as you're leading up to the essay, you're actually answering questions that relate to this article here on the left-hand side. So this is actually doing you a favor. You're already being forced to analyze the article before you get to the essay. Let's go ahead and read through this prompt. There's a lot of text on the page, but the most important is right here. This is your writing prompt. That's all you're responding to. Explain what makes the situation in Antarctica unusual. The other information on the page is important, but a lot of times students glaze over this and miss the writing prompt altogether. So you could write a really nice response to the article, and if you're not responding to this prompt, you'll get a 0. So you want to make sure that you are letting us know what makes Antarctica unusual. And then you've got a checklist here. You need a thesis, like I said earlier. You want your writing to be organized. You want detail. You want evidence. And you want to do your best with spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and grammar. Now, review the selection, plan your response, write your response. Yes, try to leave time to revise and edit your response. Meaning, you have time to check your punctuation, check your grammar, check your organization, because you can move things around. Now, you can't copy and paste here, so you are going to have to retype when you move things around. That's partly why I say plan on paper first, because then you can, type things in a different order. Now, I am going to read through this. If you want to skip over this, that's fine, but it's probably good to hear the article before you hear the response. Antarctica, governing the icy continent. Antarctica. The name alone conjures a vision of pristine, icy wilderness surrounded by silence. For much of human history, this was a fairly accurate portrait of Antarctica. Now, however, in addition to native inhabitants such as penguins and seals, scientists from all over the world make their home in the Antarctic. These scientists conduct research on a range of subjects, including ecosystems, weather patterns, and the effects of pollution. And surprisingly, increasing numbers of tourists are visiting Antarctica to mountain climb, camp, or ski. Who governs these activities when so many nations have a presence on the continent? Governed by treaty. By the 1940s, 7 countries had laid claim to territory in Antarctica. Some of those territories overlapped, and some countries would not recognize the claims made by other nations. There was no agreement about who held authority. By the mid-1950s, however, scientists were eager to use Antarctica as a base for international research. The research teams who participated in the massive 67-nation scientific project known as the International Geophysical Year demonstrated how the icy continent could be shared. Beginning in 1957, they worked together to establish coastal bases and inland stations in Antarctica. From these bases, they made valuable discoveries about the atmosphere, oceanography, and many other topics. Their success inspired 12 countries, including Argentina, Chile, Great Britain, France, and the United States, to create the Antarctic Treaty in 1959. This was the first document outlining how each nation would use the continent. The treaty went into effect in 1961. Even though the Antarctic Treaty was negotiated by a dozen countries with differing interests, the resulting document was simple. It stated that the continent could not be used for military purposes. The main purpose for being on Antarctica would be to conduct scientific research. The treaty also stipulated that countries had to provide advance notice of any Antarctic expeditions. In addition, the signers agreed to meet periodically to discuss the goals of the treaty. At the time, no one could foresee some of the changes that would occur over the next 60 years. Addressing new issues. Since 1959, more countries have joined the agreement and its objectives have been expanded. While the initial document focused on research and keeping the peace, later documents covered the protection of marine life in and around Antarctica. In 1991, another agreement reinforced the original intent of the treaty while adding that activities such as mining, drilling, and exploration of minerals would be banned indefinitely. Combined, these additional documents now make up the Antarctic Treaty, and 54 nations have signed the agreement. But new concerns need to be addressed, including the increased presence of humans in this once untouched wilderness. In the years since the Antarctic Treaty was signed, activities on the continent have changed. Science and exploration are still the main pursuits, but advances in technology have made traveling to the southern continent easier than it once was. Because of this, tourism in Antarctica has gained in popularity. In the 2018-2019 season, more than 56,000 tourists visited Antarctica. At first, most tourism involves sailing along the coast or flying over the land. Cruise ships sail to Antarctica frequently from November through March. However, tour operators now offer outings on or near the land, including kayaking, mountain climbing, and skiing. Some nations hope to profit from expanding such land-based tourism. Scientists and regulators are evaluating the impacts such permanent facilities as visitor centers, museums, and hotels would have on the environment. In 1991, tour operators formed the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators to support responsible travel. But according to Claire Christian of the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition, there aren't a lot of hard rules governing tourism. It's mostly voluntary. The Antarctic Treaty System is now faced with many questions about how to best regulate tourism. The future of Antarctica. Tourism is currently managed by the tour operators from various countries who shepherd the tourists to and from the continent. However, the Antarctic Treaty System will be monitoring the effects of tourism. Some areas of concern include the potential introduction of invasive species and damage to the environment caused by ships dumping waste in the ocean. Scientists also worry that visitors may disturb penguins, elephant seals, and other native species. Lastly, tourists who become ill or injured have little access to medical facilities on this remote continent. The parties to the Antarctic Treaty have begun discussing how to manage tourism, but reaching an agreement will take time. Whatever Antarctica's future holds, there will never be another place on Earth quite like this continent. Nowhere else on the planet have nations agreed to work together to maintain peace, support scientific research, and protect the environment. While the presence of humans on the continent is cause for concern, the Antarctic Treaty affirms that humans are also working together to protect the continent. That sense of purpose and collaboration is something to celebrate. All right, let's take another look at that student response and see how it fits in the model that I showed you. So I'm not able to copy and paste this into the actual STAAR practice test because they don't allow copying and pasting, which is good for the testing environment, bad for my purposes. But let's look at it here. This is a Google document that you'll have access to if you go to my website and throw in your email there. So, thesis statement. You'll notice there is no hook in their introduction paragraph. That's okay. You don't need a hook for your extended constructed response. If you have a teacher that tells you you do need a hook, that is not true. If you are able to add a hook, that's going to be even better. It might enhance your grade a bit, but what they really want to see is clarity. So, the reason that the situation in Antarctica is particularly unusual is because the area is governed by many nations unlike other territories on Earth, and people are putting in a lot of effort to preserve the local ecosystems in the region. There is no other place on Earth that gets this odd and special treatment. If I had more time to revise and I were this student, I would try to make this one sentence. Your thesis statement should be one sentence, and it doesn't need to be this wordy. They're trying to fit a lot in to this section, and you can kind of tell they weren't really sure where they were going, but it is clear. They do answer the prompt. They respond to it, and it's as clear as it could be with the time given, I'm guessing. So now let's look at their first body paragraph. TEDL. You'll notice that it fits perfectly. Their topic sentence, first, the biggest thing that sets Antarctica apart from the rest of the world is the way it is governed, gives a clear reason why Antarctica is unusual. They're building upon their thesis. It's well done. Their example section. By the 1940s, already 7 countries had claimed territories in Antarctica, but unlike the lands claimed in other parts of the world, there weren't clear boundaries. Scientists from 67 countries formed the International Geophysical Year to research the area and also show how everyone could share the continent. I would say that this idea could be a little bit more fleshed out, but they expand on the topic sentence and it works. I know where they're going with this. The Antarctic Treaty was created to make Antarctica a safe place for scientists to study ecosystems, weather patterns, and the effects of pollution, but also holding them accountable for preventing harm to local creatures and resources and using the area for only peaceful endeavors. Unlike all other countries on Earth, Antarctica is governed by many countries rather than only one. So the details section is a little bit wordy. There's a run-on sentence, but it works. It expands upon the example and the topic sentence. The way you want this to work is your topic sentence gives a clear idea, then you give more information with your example, even more information with the details section, and now let's see how the linking and last section works. The regulations put in place are made by people from all over the world, which allows Antarctica to be the only place where nations work together to support the research of scientists and prevent damage to the environment. It closes up the paragraph nicely. They're missing a word there in between over and world, but otherwise it works just fine. Now let's look at the second body paragraph. Topic. Also, the attention that the preservation of the natural ecosystems in Antarctica receives is unprecedented. They misspelled Antarctica, but the topic is clear. Example. Scientists are constantly studying the effects that tourists have on the wildlife and environment. Even ships dumping garbage into the oceans is far less acceptable in Antarctica than it is in the rest of the world because it is an area in particular that we want to protect. It expands upon the topic. It's a good example. Evidence from the text. We're good to go. Now the details section. More measures are put in place in Antarctica in the context of avoiding invasive species. When Europeans came to the Americas, they purposely brought their local animals with them. They did not even worry about how it would affect the native wildlife, but in contrast, even though so many countries are involved in Antarctica, none of them have brought their local animals because they want to preserve the region. We do not want buildings everywhere in Antarctica, unlike the rest of the world, as to not disturb the ecosystems. A few misspellings there, some awkward wording, but we understand where they're going with their ideas, and that's the most important part of the extended constructed response, that you have clarity. Last and linking sentence. It is so odd that Antarctica has always had this special treatment while everywhere else on Earth throughout history did not get the same care. People are actively working together to preserve the continent. It closes up the paragraph nicely. It's a clear idea. All right, let's look at the conclusion. Restated thesis. The situation in Antarctica is odd due to the way that the region is governed and because of the large effort from nations all over the world to protect the environment and native wildlife that live there. Some awkward wording. They put they instead of the. But overall, the idea is clear. Final thought. We need to continue to protect Antarctica, but we also must protect the rest of the world as well. Adding a final thought is a really great way just to enhance your response. It seals everything up nice and neat. It shows them that you understood the assignment. So what's the secret to passing the STAAR ECR and other standardized test essays? Confidence. And if you take the time to plan using the model that I showed you today, you brainstorm, you revise, you edit, you're going to be so much more confident once you hit submit than if you didn't. So what's the secret to passing the STAAR ECR and other standardized test essays? Confidence. And if you use the model that I showed you today to plan, you're going to brainstorm, revise, edit. You're going to be so much more confident once you hit submit. So if you found today's lesson helpful, please like, subscribe. It really helps me to be able to create more content like this. If you have any questions or concerns, just drop a comment below. And you can also reach out through my website or WhatsApp. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you next time.